Hello, and welcome back to Old Testament Storytime. Now, I don't know where or when you're listening to this, but right now, for me, it is October 2nd, and the leaves are changing, so I hope you're ready for the fall. Yes, today we're going to be covering the creation and the fall, and these are some classic Bible stories I feel like everyone knows, but maybe I can provide a little extra tidbit information or perspective you haven't thought of before. So, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in our scripture canon, we have 3 accounts of the creation in Genesis, Moses, and Abraham. Each of them gives a slightly different perspective. The Genesis version is in the third person singular, as if like kind of a narrative is being told by an outside narrator. The Moses version is in the first person, so from the perspective of God as he's creating the universe. And the Abraham version is in the third person plural, so kind of, it's like a narrative, but it's emphasizing that multiple gods were involved in the creation. And I think it's interesting, like in the Genesis version, it kind of feels like this impersonal legend or story that's being told. But I love thinking about the creation and the garden story in the context in which it was revealed, like to Moses and Abraham. It's not just an impersonal explanation, but a vision that God revealed to his sons to teach them about their divine identity and his love for them. So let's get into the story. We have God, he plans for and creates everything, and on the first day, God creates light and separates the light from darkness. And I'm going to come back to that. And then the second day, God creates a firmament in the midst of the waters. And it says, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. So this is interesting. There's a fun fact. In ancient Hebrew culture, they believed that the sky was almost like a dome that separated the water below from the water that exists above. Like they believed that there was a body of water between earth and heaven. So when it rains so much that like people say like the windows of heaven are opened, or if you see that phrase in the Bible, the idea is that the windows in the firmament, like the dome over the earth, are literally opened to let the rain or whatever it is through. So the third day they created the dry land and plants. Fourth day they created the sun, moon, and stars. The fifth day they created fish and birds. Sixth day animals, and finally mankind, man and then woman. And it says they created man in their own image, male and female, which makes me think that probably Heavenly Mother was pretty involved in this. I don't know. We don't have any evidence for that, but I mean, they created women in their own image, and I'm not a man, so anyway, I just think that's cool to think about. Anyway, they also create a garden paradise for Adam and Eve to live in. Adam, the name in Hebrew, literally just means man or like humanity. So, just fun fact. But Adam and Eve live in the Garden of Eden innocently, and God gives them 2 commandments. First, he commands them to multiply and replenish the earth, and then later also commands them not to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So now we have to have a little dramatic flashback to how Lucifer became Satan. So Lucifer was a son of God, just like the rest of us, in the premortal existence before the earth was created. But Lucifer thought that he could think of a better plan than God. He thought that he could save everyone without anyone being lost. But he wanted all the glory. He tried to supplant God's plan and take the honor for himself. So because of his pride and his rebellion, he got cast out of heaven and took a bunch of God's children with him. So he's cast out of heaven and he's angry. He wants to do anything he can to try and ruin God's plan. So Adam and Eve are in the garden, everything's going great, and Satan sees his opportunity. He comes in the Bible it says a serpent. This could be metaphorical, or maybe he came as like in the physical form of a serpent. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Satan comes, talks to Eve, and tricks her into eating the fruit. It's interesting because he kind of tells her a half-truth. So he tells her that when she eats the fruit, she'll have knowledge of good and evil and like become like a god, which is true. but he also tells her that she won't die if she eats the fruit, which is a lie. But whatever the case, Eve believes him. Oh, also random fun fact, but I was wondering why the fruit is always depicted as an apple, because that's just kind of random. It doesn't say it was an apple in the Bible. But the most likely reason that scholars think is because the Latin word for evil is very similar to the Latin word for apple. So that word in the name of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, people either maybe misunderstood or saw as a deliberate play on words. However, people have also conjectured about it being all different types of fruits. Could be grapes made into wine, or figs, maybe pomegranate, wheat, bananas, or even some people think it was a psychotropic mushroom. So maybe the original sin was getting high on shrooms. I don't know. Anyway, Eve decides to eat the fruit, and she also convinces Adam to eat with her. As soon as they eat, they notice that they're naked, and they decide to make aprons out of fig leaves to hide their nakedness. And I learned recently that fig leaves only last like maybe a couple days before they start to shrivel up. And so, like, they're making these coverings for themselves, but they weren't really going to last very long. So anyway, God comes, and he's confused. He asks them why they're hiding. I don't think he was confused. I mean, he asked them why they were hiding, and they confessed what they did. So he realized that that Satan tricked Eve into eating the fruit. And God promises that the seed of the woman, which we know from our Latter-day Saint perspective that the seed of the woman is Christ, God promises that Christ will have power over the certain serpent to be able to crush his head. Unfortunately, Adam and Eve can no longer live in the paradise of Eden, especially because the tree of life is there. And if they are, we know from 2 Nephi chapter 2, that if they were to take the fruit of the tree of life in their sinful state, they would have been miserable forever. So God has to kick them out from the garden, but he doesn't leave them out just to be naked and afraid. He gives them coats of skins to cover them before they leave, which is interesting just to think about, like, where those skins came from. You can think about that. I won't talk too much about that. But anyway, they left the garden, and they had to work to make food, to till the earth, to survive. But they continued to follow God and were taught by him. And we know from modern revelation that they learned the gospel in the same way that we know it. The gospel of Jesus Christ is something that has been taught since day one. Anyway, they also had lots of kids, multiplied and replenished the earth, all of that. And I think it's interesting, most Christian traditions hold the fall as a bad thing, perhaps even a failure in God's plan. But from the Book of Mormon and other restored revelation, we know that it was part of the plan all along. Adam and Eve had to fall in order to learn and progress, and that's one of my favorite doctrines. It's so comforting to know that God's plan is perfect and eternal, and that he knows exactly what he's doing. So anyway, there are so many ways that we could see Jesus in these stories in the beginning of the Bible. So I'm sure there's lots of things you can think of and things that I've alluded to. But one thing is, I'm going to talk about something I kind of learned and thought of recently. I've always been a little confused. In the creation story, God creates light and separates it from darkness before he creates the sun, moon, and stars. And I was always a little confused, like, where is this light coming from if we don't have the sun, moon, and stars? But in Doctrine and Covenants 88, 6-9, it says, "He that ascended up on high, and also he descended below all things, in that he comprehended all things, that he might be in all and through all things, the light of truth which shineth. This is the light of Christ, as also he is in the sun, and the light of the sun, and the power thereof by which it was made. as also he is in the moon, and is the light of the moon, and the power thereof by which it was made, as also the light of the stars, and the power thereof by which they were made. I don't know how literal this is, but to me this teaches the very fundamental nature of Christ and his power. His power is infinite, and no light from the sun, moon, or stars would mean anything without it. Despite the fact that he had not yet performed his sacrifice, its reality and his power were assured from the beginning, even before the creation of the universe. So, yeah, anyway, that was the creation and the fall. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.